Welcome to the chaos sector. I understand viewers may have a critique of our analysis, but we can't spend much time debating everything that is being challenged. It takes away from our reporting and our investigation into the Idaho murder case. But we also have to keep individuals from painting a narrative that we are somehow misrepresenting anyone or anything. But the funny thing is, every time we address what a viewer challenges or mentions, it leads to something else. Well, I guess we should embrace the criticism then. In the previous episode, we examined a news report that Gonzalez was essentially stalked by Koberger. I explained how this so-called evidence was provided by a law enforcement source. Well, guess who apparently knew of this information?
A new wrinkle, former LAPD detective Mark Furman, yes, that Mark Furman from the O.J. Simpson trial, now lives in Idaho and is claiming that victim Kaylee Gonzalez had a stalker.
I talked to one student, and I agree with this. It was twice removed from the person that said it, Kaylee, but Kaylee 2 months ago complained about a stalker.
Now Mark Furman claims he talked to one of the students. Let's just go ahead and replace that student with one of the roommates. Come on, not fooling anyone. Now Mark Furman spoke to one of the roommates, and they informed him that Gonzalez months prior had complained about a stalker, right? First of all, what authoritative position is Furman operating under? Well, he is currently a, quote, forensics and crime expert. He is without a doubt the law enforcement source. And the reason the media didn't name him as that source is because it brings everyone back to the O.J. Simpson trial. Yeah, I know, a long grueling year of nonsense. But one of the key reasons Simpson was found not guilty is the jury was convinced that, get this, Furman and his fellow detectives had planted the glove in his home. The whole glove doesn't fit scandal, right? Furman suggests that one of the reasons Simpson was acquitted was the detectives failed to enter evidence into the chain of custody and the prosecution's failure to adequately argue their case. But an interesting aspect here, when asked if he planted or manufactured evidence into the crime scene, Furman pleaded the fifth, refusing to answer that question. There's no need to plead the fifth if you didn't plant evidence. But if you did, you will refuse to answer because, well, for one, you may incriminate yourself, or you may literally slip up and admit it without even knowing. What does all of this have to do with the Idaho murders? Because he currently resides in Idaho. Irony is not lost in this one. Not gonna get into whether Simpson was guilty or not, it's a splitting headache to debate. But the fact that he was found not guilty, due to allegedly a glove being planted at the crime scene and not fitting, indicates that the character of Furman is not credible whatsoever. And it's more than his credibility being shot, it's the fact that he was, get this, a detective at that time. Furman was the lead detective in that case, and he discovered the, quote, bloody glove left at the crime scene. But he claims that the reason O.J. was acquitted is due to the prosecution not entering evidence into chain of custody? Pretty sure they won't leave out vital evidence, right? Meaning, there wasn't any other evidence that was deemed relevant to the murders. The key piece of evidence, which Furman claimed to have discovered, was a bloody glove at the home. All you need to do is prove this glove was worn by Simpson. But it didn't fit, which indicates that the bloody glove was planted there. Let me take you through that process. Two individuals are murdered in cold blood at his home. Detectives arrive, Furman plants a glove at the crime scene, transfers the blood of the victims onto that glove to solidify the suspect's presence at the home. Since it's Simpson's home, he would be the primary suspect. Furman intended on framing Simpson, and this evidence was rejected in court after examining that the glove did not fit the suspect. Think what you will, but the verdict was not guilty due to this evidence being rejected. Now Furman is involved in a similar murder case, and it appears he hasn't learned from his mistakes. Are you following the trails yet? We already pointed it out in previous episodes, and we might just have our culprit. If he did in fact plant evidence at Simpson's home to convict an innocent man who was a freaking NFL superstar, can we suggest he would also generate evidence against a regular guy? Remember, Furman claims that Gonzalez complained about a stalker months prior. Yet who did she complain to at the time? Her boyfriend? Her family? Well, her father has spoken out publicly, he never mentioned that his daughter complained about a stalker, right? I believe her sister may have claimed it, but the father never claimed this was true, or likely. He even stated that the authorities looked into it and found no evidence of it. Furman's claim that students claimed that Gonzalez complained about a stalker has no proof. And let's be honest here, it's not that he learned this from anyone, he produced this narrative with someone at the home, that's my opinion. But he won't claim it was from one of the roommates at the home, because it magnifies who knew what about Gonçalves being stalked by someone. So when all of the suspicious activity is unfolding, that roommate would definitely call you get the point. But let's go with the quote, students. If the students were aware of Gonçalves having a stalker, doesn't this mean she informed them? Even if she didn't tell her family, which is not likely, those students would inform her family about this stalker. Once again, the father states it was looked into, but it was not confirmed to be true. A stalker would leave evidence, somewhere. He will be spotted by his target, perhaps frequently. But the element of stalking is that the target can't effectively prove they are being stalked. The only way they can effectively prove this is by having information on the stalker, such as their identity. Keep in mind, a stalker is usually known by their target in some way, yet obviously there was no relation between Gonçalves and Kohberger. My point here is Furman's claim that students informed him about Gonçalves being stalked was a lie, and it was to generate a motive in her death. The suspect without a motive here stabs 4 college students to death. There has to be a motive for Kohberger to murder these individuals, so a motive is manufactured by way of being a stalker, to justify his charges. Just think. In the setting where a suspect enters this home, we have to assume his intentions were to commit a crime. Not robbery, but murder. If he intends on murdering individuals in this home, then he has knowledge of who is in this home. Now it appears that the narrative of a stalker applies, right? But, if there is no evidence of Kohberger stalking anyone, and no evidence that Kohberger tried to contact his so-called target, does this add up to you? No, if he was motivated by being obsessed with a target in the home, then there will be evidence, again, there will be evidence that he was linked to one of those victims. There is no, quote, digital evidence that proves Kohberger targeted Gonçalves. The authorities would have discovered this, it would be presented to the media, and his fate is sealed to the death penalty. No evidence means there is no motive for the suspect charged in this case. Not rocket science here, people. So, you may ask, then why were 4 college students stabbed to death, if there wasn't a motive? Let me distinguish this, there isn't a motive for this suspect. There is no evidence to prove Kohberger had any motive to murder anyone. But, he is linked to something, this is why he was arrested. The murderer had a motive, and it's becoming more evident that this murderer is not Kohberger. Can we also suggest that it is Furman who claims that Kohberger attempted to contact Gonçalves through DMs? More than likely that so-called evidence is coming from him. Remember, News Nation claims that this information is provided by that law enforcement source. Furman is that law enforcement source. What we have here is a corrupt detective, or better yet, a corrupt forensics and crime. Wait a minute. Forensics. Interesting. Thank you viewers for questioning our reporting, it's sharpening our swords. Let's put the pieces together, because it's starting to reveal itself rapidly. Furman claims Gonçalves complained about a stalker months prior. She is then found stabbed to death in the home, a claim that her injuries were more severe than her roommates. The hunt for a suspect is underway, they find Bryant Kohberger, reports claim he had attempted to contact Gonçalves, and reports claim his DNA was found on a knife sheath in her bedroom. 2 individuals are murdered in a home, a detective discovers a bloody glove, which was planted at the crime scene to convict a celebrity. Both cases have one person involved, Mark Furman. Reviewing the case now, do you see anything suspicious? Think deeper into this alleged chain of events. Don't worry, I'll help you. Furman is a private investigator in Idaho, who is covering up for the real murder, or murderers of those college students. Brian Kohberger is linked in some way to that circle, and just like Furman claimed one of the survivors informed him about Gonçalves, that same survivor, more than likely Mortensen, informed him about Kohberger. The frame was activated. Furman worked behind the scenes, with authorities by the way, to convince them of a likely suspect. The name, Brian Kohberger. A photo was provided, his vehicle was provided, and the authorities had to pretend they are looking for a suspect, but in reality, they knew who to track down. While everyone is focused on the media's coverage of the case, Furman will proceed to plant DNA of Kohberger in the home, hoping this will be the devastating evidence against him. Sounds familiar? He apparently tried it with Simpson, but didn't succeed. But, they have Kohberger in custody. Keep in mind, it's rooted in Kohberger being linked in some way. Mortensen is key to this, because she is the survivor we assume that so-called notified Furman about a stalker. In her affidavit, there is no mention of someone being suspected of stalking anyone, or specifically Gonçalves. If she told Furman this, who is a so-called private investigator, why didn't she tell detectives this key information? The courts have to look into that entire pile of garbage of alleged DMs from Kohberger to Gonçalves, and that would go on the record. Which doesn't exist, and this would not only compromise the case, but it would also compromise the suspicion that Kohberger is the murderer. So Slick Willies made sure she didn't mention anything about a stalker in her affidavit. What I believe will happen is a testimony that will shock the nation. And that testimony will come from Kohberger. He will state he is being framed, and once this is stated, the jury has no choice but to give it a thought, due to the lack of empirical evidence against him. Remember, he is challenging the DNA found on the knife sheath. This would address the planted evidence directly, it's the only alleged evidence that they are relying on. This can be contradicted through a top-notch defense team who can question the likelihood that the DNA exist naturally without any other forms of DNA of Kohberger in the home. Like we examined. And the authorities may have stepped in dog poop if they can't link all evidence collected at his home to the crime scene. Reporting that hair strands were found and even possible animal strands is, get this, barking up the wrong tree. You shouldn't have said it, here's why. Because if you claim there were animal strands of hair found, which is very detailed forensics, this has to be linked to the crime scene. Don't give me that, while it may not be from the crime scene. Bullshit, this is what they are alluding to, so they have to keep running with it. And running with it will lead them to a brick wall. If that is the dog's fur, then Kohberger interacted with the dog in some way, which means there has to be more evidence of Kohberger in that home. It hasn't been produced, yet they are so detailed in their forensics at this home. You find alleged animal hair, but you couldn't find any concrete evidence of the suspect at the crime scene? What about his vehicle? Was there any evidence found in his vehicle during your raid of his home? Remember, so-called FBI investigators' statements about needing that vehicle because it more than likely has evidence that links him to the home? No updates on his vehicle since then. Meaning, there is no evidence in that vehicle. But if you allude to there being animal strands of fur found in his home, surely there are animal strands of hair in his vehicle, right? Why report about a stain on his pillow that resembles blood? To sway the public into believing they have found evidence at his home that he somehow just left lying around. What did you find on his computer? Surely, photos of Gonçalves, since he was obsessed with her, right? You found a black glove? Is this the glove he used to stab his victims to death? Surely it has blood stains on it. What about his cell phone data? If he attempted to DM Gonçalves even on his computer, surely there is tons of evidence on his phone as well. All of this has resulted in nothing. On a percentage scale of this being a frame job, it's about 85%, and it continues to increase every day passing. We have been going over these issues over and over again. Let's bring it all the way back to those elements in the previous episode. For the father to come out and state that his daughter suffered more severe injuries than other victims, and there is a quote, law enforcement source, claiming Kohberger attempted to contact Gonçalves, yet the authorities haven't collected this alleged evidence, then we have to conclude, it is a lie. I reiterate, if the news reports that a quote, law enforcement source, which is more than likely a private investigator, claimed to have evidence Kohberger attempted to contact Gonçalves through DMs, this is considered concrete evidence against the suspect. The authorities would grab this evidence in a heartbeat, and the clock starts to tick on Kohberger's freedom, and even his life. But, the authorities have never reported this to be true, because we all know the media would jump all over it. So, what do you conclude here? Well, it's a lie. I'm not claiming what the father stated was a lie, but the whole, stalking Gonçalves narrative is a lie. But, then again, it is more than likely the private investigator he had was Mark Furman. Furman claimed that Gonçalves complained about a stalker months prior, right? Yet, apparently the father was not aware of this, right? So, did his private investigator keep this information from the father, but was so willing to tell the news this publicly? These are elements in the case, people, we are not plucking it out of thin air. Which came first, the chicken, or the egg? Meaning, which one was claimed first, so-called evidence Kohberger stalked Gonçalves, or the report that Gonçalves suffered more severe wounds? It doesn't matter, because they both mean the same thing, and that's a targeted victim. It's a lie, based on no evidence to justify the claim. And if this is a lie, then we have to question if Gonçalves suffered more severe injuries. One can exist without the other, but if both exist, then we see a motive, and Koberger is facing a troubled future. If Gonçalves suffered more severe wounds, it could be for a variety of reasons, such as I mentioned prior. She could have put up a stronger resistance, which meant the suspect had to use deadlier force. Or, she could have been next, after Mogan was stabbed to death, so naturally the suspect would feel the need to use that deadlier force against her. Do you understand? But, if Gonçalves suffered more severe injuries, and it is claimed that Koberger, who is now the suspect, attempted to contact her, this means he has a motive. Now all of the circumstantial evidence is not so circumstantial anymore. Breaking it down for you. The glaring suspicion is that Mark Fuhrman is involved, resides in Idaho, generated a narrative of a stalker, and possibly, even likely, planted DNA at the crime scene to frame Koberger. Please appreciate our investigative reports, this is dedicated work. That's enough for now. For those who question anything, or everything we present, understand, this is not our first rodeo. We are not experts, but we definitely have experience in this investigative field. This case has too many oddities, and now with discovering a corrupt detective in Fuhrman having his slimy hands in investigating the murders, we may be in for another O.J. Simpson trial. This is the Chaos Sector.